The assignment. The call came in at 300 Earth Standard Time, jolting Elias Chen from a rare deep sleep. Few people had his private comm channel, and fewer still would use it at this hour unless something was catastrophically wrong. Chen, he mumbled, reaching for the blinking console beside his bed. Engineer Chen, this is Admiral Voss of the Galactic Confederation. Your services are required immediately. A transport will arrive at your location in 2 hours. Pack for an extended assignment. Elias sat up, fully awake now. Admiral, I'm not military. I'm a civilian contractor. This situation requires your specific expertise, Mr. Chen. The compensation will be substantial. A pause. And this is a matter of galactic security. The call ended before Elias could ask any of the dozen questions bouncing around his head. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, and began packing. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Confederation for 30 years, still newcomers among species that measured their civilization's histories in millennia. What humans lacked in technological advancement, they made up for in adaptability and ingenuity. Elias had built his reputation on solving engineering problems that baffled even the most advanced alien species. His intuitive understanding of technology, any technology, had made him both famous and wealthy. 2 hours later, a sleek Confederation vessel hovered above his Montana workshop. As he boarded, a tall, blue-skinned Aravian officer greeted him with the traditional four-armed salute. Engineer Chen, I am Commander Nix. You will be briefed en route to Outpost Theta 9. Theta 9. Elias frowned. Never heard of it. Few have, came the crisp reply. That's part of the problem. The journey took 3 days, most of which Elias spent in a stateroom studying technical specifications for systems he'd never encountered before. The briefing was frustratingly vague. Critical systems failures at a research outpost, previous repair attempts unsuccessful, situation deteriorating rapidly. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace, Elias moved to the viewport and felt his breath catch. Outpost Theta 9 orbited a neutron star, the collapsed remnant of a once massive sun. The station itself was built into a massive asteroid, with only minimal external structures visible. Quite a location, he murmured. Commander Nix stood beside him. The radiation and gravitational fields provide natural security, also useful for their research, which is classified, Nix replied without hesitation. The docking procedure was unusually complex, with multiple security scans and authentication protocols. When they finally disembarked, they were met by a delegation of aliens, 2 Aravians like Nix, a reptilian Drex with gleaming scales, and a spherical Koros floating in its containment field. Director Savick, Nix introduced the lead Aravian, who had intricate silver markings on her blue skin indicating high rank. Engineer Chen, Director Savick said, studying him with large, unblinking eyes. Your reputation precedes you. We hope it is not exaggerated. Depends on who's doing the exaggerating. Elias replied with a slight smile. None of the aliens returned it. Follow me, Savick said. Time is critical. As they moved through the corridors, Elias noted the station's unusual design. Unlike the clean, minimalist aesthetic typical of Confederation architecture, Theta 9 felt almost organic, with curved walls and non-standard junctions. More concerning were the frequent power fluctuations, lights dimming momentarily, doors hesitating before opening. How long has the station been experiencing these symptoms? He asked. 42 standard days, the Drex responded, its voice a low rumble. The malfunctions began in the lower levels and have been spreading upward through the station's systems. Have you identified an initial cause? The aliens exchanged glances. That's why you're here, Director Savick finally said. They arrived at what appeared to be the main control center, a circular room filled with monitoring equipment and harried-looking staff from at least 6 different species. Notably absent were other humans. These are the station schematics, Savick said, activating a holographic display. All affected systems are highlighted in red. Elias studied the complex three-dimensional map. Nearly half the station's systems were compromised, with the highest concentration deep in the asteroid's core. "What's down there?" he asked, pointing to a large blank area near the center of the asteroid. "Storage," the Koros answered too quickly. "Irrelevant to the current problem." Elias raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Years of working with alien species had taught him when they were hiding something, and everyone on this station was definitely hiding something. "I'll need access to all systems, including diagnostic tools and maintenance tunnels," he said. "Of course," Sav replied, though her posture stiffened. "Zell will be your guide and assistant." She gestured to a young Aravian who had been quietly standing near the door. "Welcome to Theta 9, Engineer Chen," Zell said, performing a less formal version of the four-armed salute. "I've prepared a workspace for you." The workspace turned out to be a cramped laboratory several levels down from the control center. Elias spent the first few hours familiarizing himself with the station's systems, which were a hybrid of technologies from at least a dozen different species. "This is unusual," he commented to Excel, who hovered nervously nearby. "Most Confederation outposts use standardized systems. Theta 9 is special," Excel replied, all four hands fidgeting. "So I'm gathering. Tell me, what exactly do you research here?" "I'm not cleared to discuss that," came the predictable answer. Elias nodded and returned to his work. By the end of the station's artificial day cycle, he had identified several anomalies in the power distribution network. There were massive energy draws that didn't correspond to any systems shown in the schematics. Whatever they were powering, it was in that mysterious central region, labeled as storage. After Excel left, presumably to rest, Elias continued working. He hacked into the station's security network, a simple task for someone who understood systems as intuitively as he did. The camera feeds showed minimal activity during the night cycle, with most crew members in their quarters. Perfect time for exploration. Using his newly acquired access, Elias made his way down through the station, following the path of the strange power conduits. Security was surprisingly light, with most checkpoints automated. As he descended deeper into the asteroid, the architecture became even more unusual, older, with symbols and patterns he didn't recognize from any known species. 5 levels down from his workspace, he encountered a massive door unlike anything else on the station. No visible control panel, no obvious locking mechanism. Just smooth metallic surface covered in swirling patterns that seemed to shift as he looked at them. "Curious," he murmured, reaching out to touch the door. The moment his fingers made contact, the patterns flared with blue light. The door slid open silently, revealing a cavernous chamber beyond. Elias stepped inside, and the door closed behind him. The chamber was dimly lit by the same blue light that had appeared on the door, emanating from what appeared to be circuits running through the walls, floor, and ceiling. At the center of the room stood a pillar of swirling energy, contained within some kind of field. As he approached, the energy reacted, patterns shifting and flowing like liquid. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing he'd ever seen. "You shouldn't be here," said a voice behind him. Elias turned to find the Drex security officer, its scaled hand resting on what was unmistakably a weapon. "I was following the power fluctuations to their source," Elias said calmly, "which appears to be, whatever this is. This area is restricted to all personnel." "Then why did the door open for me?" Elias countered. The Drex's reptilian features were difficult to read, but Elias thought he detected surprise. "The door opened for you, without authorization. I touched it, and it opened." The Drex spoke quietly into a communicator in its native language, too rapid for Elias's translator to catch. Within minutes, Director Savick arrived with several security officers. "What did you do?" she demanded, looking from Elias to the swirling energy pillar, which seemed more agitated than before. "Nothing. I followed the power signatures to find the source of your malfunctions. The door opened when I touched it. Now, would someone care to explain what exactly I'm looking at? Savick studied him silently for several long moments. It responded to your touch, she finally said, more to herself than to him. After all this time, Director, one of the security officers said sharply, protocol requires. I know the protocol, she snapped. But circumstances have changed. She turned back to Elias. What you're seeing, Engineer Chen, is the reason this station exists. We call it the Nexus. It's a piece of technology left behind by a species that vanished from the galaxy over 50,000 years ago. Elias looked back at the swirling energy. And it's causing your system failures. No, Savick said. It's trying to activate. And for some reason, it seems to be responding to you. As if confirming her words, the energy pillar pulsed, sending waves of blue light washing over the chamber. The station trembled, and alarm klaxons began to sound. What's happening? Elias demanded as the trembling intensified. The Nexus is fully activating, Savick said, backing toward the door. Everyone out. Now. As the others fled, Elias found himself unable to move, transfixed by the swirling energy that now seemed to be reaching toward him with tendrils of light. One touched his hand, and instead of pain, he felt a surge of recognition. The last thing he heard before consciousness left him was Director Savick shouting, "Secure the human. Don't let him leave the station." The elation. Elias awoke in a medical bay, restrained to a bed with force fields. His head pounded with the worst headache he'd ever experienced, and his vision swam with afterimages of swirling blue energy. Director Savick stood nearby, engaged in heated discussion with Commander Nix and several other officers he didn't recognize. Unprecedented reaction. Savick was saying, "The genetic markers are undeniable. The Confederation Council must be informed immediately," argued a tall, insectoid alien. "This changes everything." "Excuse me," Elias interrupted, his voice hoarse. "Would someone mind explaining why I'm restrained and what happened to me?" The group turned to him, expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion to what Elias could only interpret as fear. Savick approached his bed, dismissing the others with a gesture. "What do you remember, Engineer Chen?" "The energy. The Nexus, you called it. It reached out to me." He frowned, trying to articulate the strange sensation. "It felt like recognition, like it knew me." "In a way, it did," Savick said, studying him intently. "The Nexus is part of a network created by an ancient species we call the predecessors. They were the most advanced civilization this galaxy has ever known until they mysteriously vanished. What does that have to do with me? The Nexus has been dormant for millennia. We discovered it 20 years ago and built this station to study it. Despite our best efforts, we've barely scratched the surface of its potential." Savick paused. "Until you touched it." She activated a holographic display above his bed. It showed 2 DNA sequences side by side. "The left is standard human DNA. The right is yours." She highlighted several sections. "These markers don't exist in any other human we've tested. They're engineered, precisely inserted with a level of genetic technology far beyond anything currently existing in the Confederation." Elias stared at the display, trying to process her words. "You're saying I was, what? Genetically modified?" "Not you specifically. Your ancestors, tens of thousands of years ago." Savick's voice softened slightly. "Engineer Chen, what do humans know of their evolutionary history?" "The standard theory, evolved from primates on Earth, developed civilization about 10,000 years ago. And before that?" Elias shrugged as best he could while restrained. "Hunter-gatherers for a couple 100,000 years." Savick nodded. "That's the commonly accepted narrative. But it's incomplete." She adjusted the display to show archaeological data. "Approximately 70,000 years ago, human evolution took a sudden, dramatic turn. Your brain size increased rapidly. You developed complex language and tool use far faster than natural evolution should allow. What are you suggesting? The predecessors engineered those changes, she said simply. They modified early humans, inserting specific genetic markers, including the ones you carry, that would remain dormant until needed. Needed for what? Before Savick could answer, the station rocked violently. Alarm klaxons blared, and emergency lighting activated. Director Savick to control. She snapped into her communicator. Report. Confederation military vessels have entered the system, came the panicked reply. They're demanding immediate surrender of the station and transfer of all research data. They've authorized use of force if we resist. Savick's face darkened. How did they know? She glanced at Commander Nix, who looked equally troubled. This discussion will have to wait, she told Elias, deactivating his restraints. The situation has become complicated. That's an understatement, he muttered, sitting up and massaging his wrists. What do Confederation military vessels want with your research station? Not the station. The Nexus. Savick's voice dropped lower. There are factions within the Confederation who believe the predecessor's technology should be weaponized rather than understood. If they gain control of the Nexus. Another violent tremor shook the station. Elias steadied himself against the bed. Why now? You said you've been studying it for 20 years. Savick and Nix exchanged glances. Because it never activated before, Nix said. Not until you touched it. The implication settled heavily on Elias. You're saying I triggered something? Yes, Savick confirmed. And certain factions have been monitoring our communications, waiting for exactly this moment. Another officer burst into the medical bay. Director, they've begun boarding procedures. Security teams are engaging, but we're outnumbered. We need to reach the Nexus chamber, Savick said grimly. Engineer Chen, will you help us? The choice is yours, but I believe you're the only one who can truly activate the Nexus as the predecessors intended. Elias hesitated only briefly. Whatever was happening, he was now part of it, whether by chance or some ancient design. Lead the way. They moved quickly through corridors now filled with panicked staff and the distant sounds of weapons fire. Savick led them through maintenance tunnels and hidden passages, avoiding the main routes where fighting was heaviest. Why would the predecessors modify humans? Elias asked as they descended toward the Nexus chamber. Protection, Cell answered, having joined them during their escape from the medical bay. The predecessors faced an enemy they couldn't defeat, a species called the Harvesters that appears cyclically to destroy advanced civilizations. Like a galactic extinction event, Nix added. The historical records suggest the Harvesters return approximately every 50,000 years. The weight of their words hit Elias, and it's been about 50,000 years since the predecessors vanished. Savick nodded grimly. The Nexus is part of a defense network the predecessors created before they were destroyed. They seeded modified genetic material throughout the galaxy in species they believed had potential, including humans. Your specific genetic markers suggest you're a key, someone designed to interface with and activate the network when the time came. They reached the massive door to the Nexus chamber. It was surrounded by Confederation military troops, engaged in a firefight with station security. We'll never get through, Nix muttered. Elias studied the corridor, his engineer's mind rapidly analyzing the structure. There's another way. He pointed to a maintenance hatch. That should lead to a service corridor that runs above the chamber. Inside the narrow tunnel, they crawled toward the sound of the swirling energy that Elias could somehow feel pulsing through the station's structure. The Nexus has been more active since your contact, Savick explained as they moved. It's trying to connect with the other nodes in the network. How many are there? 17 confirmed, scattered throughout the galaxy. Some have been studied, others merely located. This is the most active. They emerged through a ceiling panel into the Nexus chamber. The energy pillar had tripled in size. Its blue light now shot through with strands of gold and white. The swirling patterns had become more organized, almost like writing. As Elias approached, tendrils of energy reached toward him, just as before. This time, he didn't resist. "What is it trying to tell you?" Cell whispered. "Everything," Elias murmured. The information flooded his mind, not in words, but in concepts and images too complex for language. He saw the predecessors, a species of incredible intelligence and compassion. He saw the harvesters emerging from dark space between galaxies, massive biomechanical entities that consumed advanced civilizations and left only the most primitive species to evolve for the next cycle. He saw the predecessors' desperate final plan, a network of defense nodes, each containing accumulated knowledge and technology, and genetic modifications to species they believed might one day resist the harvesters. And he saw that the harvesters were awakening again, their massive forms stirring in the void between galaxies. The chamber door exploded inward. Confederation troops poured through, weapons raised, led by an Arabian admiral with crimson markings. "Step away from the artifact," the admiral commanded. "By order of the Confederation Defense Council, this technology is now under military jurisdiction." "Admiral Voss," Savick said coldly, "you've exceeded your authority." "The Council disagrees," Voss replied. "The Nexus represents the most powerful technology ever discovered. We cannot allow it to remain in the hands of researchers." "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Elias said, still connected to the swirling energy. "The Nexus isn't a weapon. It's a shield. A distinction without difference," Voss said dismissively. "Under proper control, it can be both." Through his connection to the Nexus, Elias understood the Admiral's true intentions. Not defense against the harvesters, who the Confederation military didn't truly believe existed, but dominance over other species, including the relatively new human members. "I can't let you do that," Elias said quietly. Voss smiled thinly. "You don't have a choice, Engineer Chen." "Actually, I do." Elias took a step backward, directly into the swirling energy of the Nexus. Instead of harm, he felt a surge of power as the connection deepened. Knowledge and abilities dormant in his genetically modified DNA awakened fully. He saw the entire network, all 17 nodes pulsing with reconnected energy after millennia of dormancy. In that moment, Elias understood why the predecessors had chosen humans. Not for their physical strength or even their intelligence, but for their adaptability and determination. Their refusal to accept defeat even against overwhelming odds. The chamber filled with blinding light as the Nexus responded to Elias's complete integration. When it faded, he stood transformed, the energy of the Nexus flowing through and around him like a living extension of his body. "What have you done?" Voss demanded, backing away. "What I was designed to do," Elias replied, his voice resonating strangely. "The Nexus network is now active. It's already detecting the harvesters approaching from dark space. We have perhaps 5 years before they reach the galaxy." "This is still Confederation property," Voss insisted, though his confidence was clearly shaken. "No," Elias said simply. "It never was. The predecessors left this technology for all species, not for the domination of one over others." Through his connection, he sent a command throughout the network. In 17 locations across the galaxy, identical energy pillars pulsed in unison, sending out a signal that would be understood by every sentient species. Images appeared in the chamber, holographic displays showing the harvesters, the defense network, and the truth about many species' modified origins. The genetic modifications the predecessors made weren't just to humans, Elias explained as all present stared at the displays. 17 species were chosen, each with qualities the predecessors valued. Only together do we have a chance against what's coming. Admiral Voss lowered his weapon slowly. "How can we be sure this threat is real?" "You can't," Elias acknowledged. "Not yet, but the evidence is there for those willing to see it." He gestured, and the displays showed destroyed solar systems, remnants of civilizations erased so completely that only the predecessors had recognized the pattern. What happens now? Savik asked quietly. Elias felt the Nexus's energy stabilize within him. He was changed, but still himself, a bridge between humanity's present and the legacy left for them. Now we prepare, he said. The network will identify others with active genetic markers. Together, we'll form a council, not to rule, but to guide. The harvesters can be defeated, but only if we stand united. As he spoke, he could feel the other nodes activating across the galaxy, connecting with others like him, modified individuals from 17 species, waking to their purpose after millennia of dormancy. In that moment, humanity's place in the galaxy was forever changed. No longer newcomers to be tolerated or patronized, but essential partners in the coming struggle. The predecessors believed in us, Elias told those assembled. They saw something in humanity worth preserving, worth enhancing. Now we have to prove them right. Admiral Voss straightened, making a decision. The Confederation Council will need to be informed. This changes everything. Yes, Elias agreed, feeling the weight and wonder of what had been set in motion. It does. 3 months later, Elias stood on the observation deck of what was now called Nexus Station, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. Representatives from all 17 modified species were gathering for the first Council of Defense. Director Savik joined him at the viewport. The last delegates arrive tomorrow. How do you feel? Elias considered the question. The Nexus energy had stabilized within him, becoming part of his being rather than an external force. Through it, he remained connected to the other 16 awakened individuals, each changed as he had been, each struggling with their new reality. Overwhelmed, he admitted, but ready. The Confederation is still adjusting to the revelation. Savik observed. Some species are having difficulty accepting their modified origins. Change is never easy, Elias said, especially when it challenges everything you thought you knew about yourself. Through the viewport, Earth was visible as a small blue dot in the distance. Humanity was evolving again, coming to terms with their true heritage and the role they would play in the coming conflict. Do you think we can defeat them? Savik asked quietly. The harvesters? Elias thought of the countless civilizations that had fallen before, and of the predecessors' final desperate hope embodied in the 17 chosen species and the network they had left behind. The predecessors couldn't do it alone, he said, but they made sure we wouldn't have to. Together, we have a chance.